Hello, welcome back. Let's fly through federalism. Yeah, that's easier said than done. Okay, so I'm going to try to be as short and sweet as possible, but you know Miss Cook is never short, but I sure am sweet. Okay, so what is federalism? Federalism is when power is divided and shared. Keyword here, divided and shared. Okay, between a federal or national government. We have that, three different branches: Congress, President, Supreme Court, and all federal courts. And the states. We have 50 individual state governments. And I'm going to call federalism the beauty of America, but also a fundamental flaw. It is why we are always divided. From the very get-go, we had Federalists versus Anti-Federalists, the first two major parties in the two-party system. Those that want more of a federal government or national government role, because states might be, at least in 2020, perhaps discriminatory, or some states may not recognize the rights of other states, even though they have to per the Constitution, and something might be held up in the courts. So more often than not, if you look at the example of same-sex marriage, and even with education, the federal government has kind of stepped in, really, to me, ever since the Civil War and Reconstruction, 1860s, 70s on, and definitely with FDR and this, New Deal, this whole new wave of federalism. So, how many government entities have jurisdiction or authority over you? If you think about it, it's like 4 or 5. If you're sitting in Ludlow High School. Okay, you have the federal government, then you have your state government, then you have county, Hampden County, then you have the town of Ludlow, right, local government. And then if you're in school, you have, Ludlow High School. That is a public sector. That's that's a public or a government entity. And you actually have less rights in the classroom than you do across the street, sitting in the lawn of town hall. You have more rights there than you do at Ludlow High School. There we have it, federalism, a system of shared governance, right? But shared power between national and state. So power is divided and shared between the national or federal government and the states. National and federal are synonymous here. Okay, why can't Michigan declare war on Canada? Because the power to declare war is given to Congress in the Constitution. That was in our scavenger hunt, right? It's in Article 1, Section 8. I forget which clause, but it tells us, right? Congress has the power to declare war, not states, and not the president. Why can't Wyoming coin their own money, right? Or make their own money? Because that is a power given to Congress. Again, listed in Article 1, Section 8. Okay, a delegated or expressed, right, listed power given to Congress. So no, states can't just print their own money. There's a federal government, and the federal government makes the money. Okay, let's say Ms. Cook wants to go hang out in Wyoming, and I have my Massachusetts cash. Okay, that's going to be a pain in the butt, especially if you're a traveler, going all over, 50 different states, 50 different currencies. Makes no sense. That's why the Articles was a failure. So again, this is a power given to Congress. So the answer here is, again, both of these are powers given to the federal government. The states cannot do this. These are exclusively given to Congress. How do I know that? Because I read the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, to be specific. This is an activator, so we're going to move on. Political cartoon, moving on. Okay, concurrent. Concurrent means at the same time, or powers that overlap. So these are powers that are shared by both the federal government and the state governments. And there's some examples here, like taxation, borrow money, establishing courts, establishing a minimum wage. Okay, in one of the classes, 5 states, we looked this up, 5 states currently, their minimum wage is the same as the federal government, $7.25 an hour. Tennessee being one of them. Okay, I think Alabama, it was all southern states, 5, where $7.25 is the minimum wage, which is also the federal minimum wage. So what the federal government is saying here is you can't pay less than $7.25. Now in Massachusetts, we have set the bar really high, right? Think about Massachusetts minimum wage. Okay, so in the early days, division between state and federal government was very, very clear. The states, right, relied and did their own thing within their own borders, and they regulated, per the 10th Amendment, right, reserved powers, not given to the federal government are thus reserved for the states. And the federal government regulated, national and international issues. And this is called dual federalism. So the federal government kind of stayed in its own lane and only handled national, international issues, and the states stayed in their lane. And the question here is why and when did things change? The Civil War, times of crises. Okay, times of crises. So here's the answer, right? The Civil War and onward, Reconstruction. The federal government becomes intertwined or imbued or embedded, okay, whatever word you want to use, with state government and regional authority as well. Times of crisis like the GD, the Great Depression, or the Global Depression. Think about it. This is a global depression. Our federal government is going to provide that much needed relief and aid. And more often, contemporary issues for environmental issues, right? States perhaps aren't regulating. And so we need our federal government to step in and create some sort of uniform regulation to protect the environment or climate change, which our federal government is kind of failing to do so. How about anti-discrimination, right? And to promote equality and equal access and opportunity, like same-sex marriage. So in the past, right, pre-Civil War, pre-1860s, so from 1787, 1789 is when the Constitution will be ratified or becomes the official law of the land. Till about 1860s, the Civil War, this is what federalism looked like. We call it dual layer cake federalism, where you can see it's kind of clear. And then, with these times of crisis, now we have marble cake or cooperative federalism, where, again, they are blended. So here's some other examples. Dual federalism, right? Very clear, kind of staying in their own lane. And what we have now for sure is cooperative federalism, this kind of sorrel marble blend. There's also something called new federalism, where some presidents and politicians have tried to go back to there's no way we can go back to dual, that's for certain. But trying to restore some of the powers back to the state, like Donald Trump, Ronald Reagan, George Bush, although George Bush also participated in cooperative federalism by, adding a whole new cabinet, right? The Department of Homeland Security. So he's probably not the best example. Okay, so yeah, you guys could take notes on this. This is a slide that shows you some very, the exclusive powers given to the federal government. So the states cannot coin money. That is the federal government. The federal government regulates foreign and interstate commerce. We have a federal, right, army. We don't have, individual state. The federal government, the Congress, right, has the power to declare war. Congress has the power to grant patents and copyrights, to make treaties, right? These are all federal or exclusive powers given just to the national government. On the right are reserved powers for the states, typically state issues, because again, like the 10th Amendment says, anything that's not delegated or outlined in this Constitution to the federal government thus is reserved to the states. Concurrent, this means both the state and the national or federal government has these powers. Okay, I gave some of these examples. Okay, minimum wage was my example. Establish a police force, right? Claim property, private property use, eminent domain, set standards and regulations, define crimes and set punishments, establish courts, etc. Same kind of visual here. We're going to go over this in class, but I think this is important to go over. So in 1958, yeah, we have an interracial marriage here, and they're going to be married in D.C. and return home to Virginia, where it's against the law to be married. Yes, can you believe it? 1958, folks. And yeah, they're going to be arrested. This will make its way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will rule against Virginia law. Again, Virginia is being discriminatory, and this is why we need the federal government to step in like the Supreme Court did. Same with Roe v. Wade as precedent, right, with abortion, and same-sex marriage with Obergefell versus Hodges. Roe v. Wade is 1973, and Obergefell versus Hodges is 2015. It's only been 5 years of legalized same-sex marriage. This video was an Ed puzzle. You loved it? Okay, this balance of power, we're always anytime you have to share power, you're going to have conflict. Okay, so national policy making is constrained by sharing power, and this is what the interesting part is. The national government has to share power with 3 branches, and then you have the 50 state governments. Our framers, think about this. There was only 13 states at the time. They never could have foreseen 50 individual states. That's unthinkable. Can you imagine, John Adams? So not only do you have to share power within the national or federal government, but now you have to share power with the 50 individual states. And anytime you have power divided and shared, you're going to have conflict. Okay, so to answer this, you obviously go back and you look at any of the visuals that I went through. So this was a pear deck that I gave my kiddos. So I'm just going to move on here. So how does the Constitution allocate power, right? How do we know what power is given? Well, you read the Constitution. I've done it for you. And there are 3 different types of powers that we get from this Constitution. The delegated, right, or they're listed. Delegated just means they're stated or listed. I'm going to call them expressed. Okay, the expressed powers. These are powers found in the Constitution. Article 1, Section 8. I'm literally going to give them to you when we move on to later units. Okay, they are expressed powers. You can break them up into like peacetime and wartime powers. Then Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18 gives us the necessary and proper clause. And with that, we get to create these implied powers. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say the federal government has the ability to establish a minimum wage, but it's an implied power using the stated power, right, of regulation of commerce. And then there's something called inherent. Obviously, by default, these are going to be powers given to the United States, like declaration of war, making treaties, and so forth. Inherent, you don't really need to worry about. We will talk about expressed versus implied. So here we go. Expressed. I'm not calling them enumerated. Let's call it expressed. These are listed. Article 1, Section 8. Okay, they are given to Congress or the federal government, and they're specifically described in the Constitution. Here they are. This is what I will give you guys. I'll actually give you an example. I'll actually give you the actual, Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, copy and pasted, and then this, cheat sheet, helpful chart. The implied powers. So here we have the necessary and proper clause, Article 1. Let me go back here. Notice how Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, to make all laws necessary and proper to the execution. In order to execute, right, these powers to regulate commerce, right, they're going to have to create laws that will be necessary and proper in order to execute them. So that we use this clause to create these implied powers. They're not listed. They are not found in the Constitution. For example, a draft, right? A military draft. But that comes from other powers. Or minimum wage. Okay, we're going to go over a bunch of examples. So these are assumed using the necessary and proper clause. And this is going to be established with this court case, McCullough versus Maryland. It declared that Congress has these implied powers. I think this was about the banks, right? The federal or national bank. And sorry, guys. Sorry, Maryland. And so basically it's going to establish supremacy of the U.S. Constitution and federal law over state law. So this Commerce Clause, this is Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3. Okay, the power to regulate interstate commerce. We're going to get so many implied powers from this. So we get the implied power to set a minimum wage, to outlaw, right, and ban any workplace discrimination, to make up laws that oversee workplace safety. Okay, none of these are in the Constitution, but it does say that we have the express power to regulate commerce. So these implied powers are created using the necessary and proper clause. Look at the power to collect taxes. We create the IRS from it. We can punish tax evaders from it. Licensing, right, or the outlawing of selling of certain items. All from the express power. None of this is listed. The IRS isn't anywhere in the Constitution, guys. It comes from the expressed or enumerated listed power to collect taxes. Okay, so yeah, this military draft, nowhere in the Constitution. Nowhere. But what is expressed or listed is the power Congress has to raise an army and a navy, and that is where we imply or create this military draft. Another nice chart, the Pear Deck, you used this, right? This chart basically answers the question for you. We're going to move on here. All right, last type of power. This deals with immigration, acquiring territory, peace treaties, declaration of war. These are inherent powers given to Congress and the presidency just to, get the job done. They might not be specifically listed in the Constitution, although many of them are. They are reasonable powers that are a logical part of, those delegated powers. All right, this 10th Amendment, this is where we get the state powers from, okay? They're the Reserved Powers Amendment, and it says the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, so not given to the feds, the federal government, is thus reserved to the states. And you guys can see some examples here. This is where we establish local government, schools, driver's license, how to be a teacher, how to be a lawyer, nursing board exams, to conduct elections, marriage licenses. Okay, 14th Amendment. This is so important. This is going to enhance federal power. Here's why. Let me first explain what this is. This is a heavy, packed amendment, and it grants citizenship. Okay, so it comes from right after the 13th Amendment, which abolishes slavery. This will grant citizenship and equal protection and due process under the law. Okay, it also, again, citizenship comes from Section 1, and you guys can see this is a really loaded amendment. Okay, I'm going to argue this is the most important amendment. This will be passed in 1868. This is the most important amendment, not only for the granting citizenship. As you can see here, all persons born or naturalized in the U.S., right, they are citizens, but for the equal protection and due process clause. And because this forces the states to follow the Bill of Rights. That's how it enhances federal power. Over the years, the 14th Amendment has been used to require the states to follow those Bill of Rights protections. Amendment 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So this is forcing, it's known as selective corporation, okay? This forces, you don't need to know that, that's an AP term, but this forces the states to follow the Bill of Rights, which is huge, huge. Because the states are like, sorry, I don't have to follow that, that's just the federal government. I don't think so, states. Okay, so this balance of power. The Constitution does not create these clear-cut, cookie-cutter lines and boundaries for which types of policy fall under which level. We have 3 different levels of governments. We have 3 different branches of governance, even within the state and federal levels. So how do we decide who gets what? It's not clear, and it's going to change over time, and it varies by which clauses and amendments and court cases that we look at, who's looking at these, and so it's really in flux. It will change. Who's in power? Which administration's in power? I argue, look, presidents come and go, but Supreme Court justices, they last a lifetime unless they resign. So it is really important, especially if, equal rights are on the line for groups of people. Another political cartoon. We're going to move on. Okay, this is for my honors kids, so if Standard's reading this, I will not make South Dakota versus Dole, but this is basically, did Congress exceed its spending powers or violate the 21st Amendment by passing the law, basically saying, hey, so the states wanted, they had all different drinking ages, and so Congress, in order to get them to basically create the same legal drinking age, they said, hey, make it 21 and we'll give you this cash, okay, for highway funds. So South Dakota's obviously going to fight back. I think South Dakota's drinking age was like 19. I can't remember. So this is going to go to the Supreme Court, and the court is going to hold that Congress was within its constitutional bounds, and that it's in the pursuit of the general welfare to legalize, and have the minimum drinking age as 21, and the way to get the states to do that was through dollar bills, y'all. Okay, that's a Hip Hughes reference. Okay, I keep referencing this, Obergefell versus Hodges. Multiple same-sex couples are going to sue states. There's going to be like 4 or 5 states that are in violation here, and the Supreme Court is going to step in and say, hey, states, stop discriminating. Okay, it'll legalize same-sex marriage. And this is going to limit the power of the states because typically marriage was a reserved power, right? 10th Amendment reserved power for the states. But when you have 50 different states and some states are going to discriminate, and if, I'm married to Veronica in Massachusetts, and then in 2014 I moved to Tennessee because they just have such great minimum wage, $7.25. Now my marriage is null and void. Like, that's discriminatory. And so, again, me and Veronica, by the 14th Amendment, right, due process and equal protection. Okay, and the 14th Amendment will be used in this important Supreme Court case. So this will legalize same-sex marriage. Okay, I'm going to talk about the United States versus Lopez. This is where the state powers are protected. Basically, the federal government was trying to create gun laws in school zones, and they're trying to use the Commerce Clause. And in 1995, the Supreme Court will step in and say, look, no, this is the federal government is reaching here. Economic activity, gun laws don't really fall under economic activity to regulate commerce here. So that's, the debated case. We'll talk about it later on in the year. All right, cooperative government. This is when federal and state government are supposed to work together. This will happen a few times in history with the Morrill Act of 1862, which will create, federal universities, or public universities, I should say. Not federal. Public universities like UMass. UMass will be created. Lincoln will sign this into law, and it provides federal money for states to create state public universities. So UMass, I think, will get its feet on the ground and start accepting students. 1864? My slide says, I want to say 1865. Another example with that minimum wage. Not minimum wage, and I'm not going to fix this. Sorry, guys. Minimum drinking age. Interstate highway system. In order to provide funds for this interstate highway system, they persuaded the states to have the minimum drinking age be 21. So, how can the federal government make state governments do what they want? Dollar bills, y'all. You guys can see here for yourselves. What state, relies on federal aid the most? Mississippi is about 41%. Looks like Mississippi. What do these darker shades, what do these states have in common? Any irony here? Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, Kentucky, Georgia, Arizona, Montana, South Dakota, Oregon, which I'm surprised about. Maine, very surprising. What do these states have in common? Okay, I am not going to talk about unfunded mandates. If you want to look at this, feel free. But this is some AP stuff, so I will not go into to detail about unfunded mandates. And there we have it, guys. That's a wrap. I'm sorry this was rushed, but I was trying to get this in 20 minutes or less, and here I am at 23. I hope this helped clarify some misunderstandings about federalism, and I hope you can use this in advance to your case study. Signing off. Goodbye.